How's it going, everybody? Welcome to LUMIX Live this week. As the title says, we're going to be talking about LUMIX Lab, and we're actually going to be talking about LUTs too. So by extension, that would be, pretty much anything to do with color and just the image that you can get out of these cameras. I've got my S1 Mark IIe hooked up, so we can go through this. I've got a couple things I want to talk about as far as like the way different photo and video profiles work. I can already see a couple questions regarding some of the stuff that I've already got planned. And then I've got top down so we can actually talk about LUMIX Lab a little bit more. Obviously, we've done these streams before, but over the last, I'd say probably about a month, I would say probably since we, kind of released the updates, I've seen a lot more questions about how all of it works and how all that stuff kind of goes together. So yeah, I've got a lot of stuff ready to go, but like always, if you have questions during these streams and you want me to try to address them, make sure to tag at LUMIX USA. This way I can see the question, we can try to get to it. If it's something I can demo with the camera, I will definitely do that. If it's not something to demo, then you get to hear me talk and hopefully it makes some sense. But before we jump into that, I want to remind those of you in the United States that LUMIX Pro Service is available. This is a two-tier program in the US. You have the red tier, which is free. So if you've purchased a LUMIX camera, you can follow the QR code right below me. Get yourself registered. You get that 3-year extended warranty for all the new purchases. So it does have to be a new camera purchase from an authorized dealer. But then if you want a higher level of service and support, so maybe you use your equipment a lot harder, maybe you just prefer to have a better peace of mind of your equipment, you can always take a look at the Platinum tier once you've been registered, gets you all the kind of core stuff out of the way first. That level is paid. That's going to get you the 3-year extended warranty, but on top of that, you're going to get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs. You're going to get annual sensor cleanings, firmware updates, lens calibration, kind of the maintenance stuff that a lot of times we want to, make sure our equipment's in good shape if we're a seasonal type photographer. But you also get access to a membership hotline, so you can call in and speak to somebody Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or East Coast Time, whenever you're watching this stream. So yeah, that's available in the US. You can take a look at that down in the description below or on the QR code right below me. What else? I think that's all I had for the kind of little opening spiel. Let's take a look at some of the questions that have come in already. So, Oasis, LUMIX Flow should always keep the smartphone awake when it's connected to the camera. So, yeah, this is one of the things that I know Matt Fraser and I have mentioned over. I don't know where we are on the process of that. I don't write apps, I don't develop them, so I'm not 100% sure what's involved with doing all of that. But it has been mentioned to the teams about, kind of forcing like an override to stay awake. I don't know if or when that kind of update would come, but we have shared that over to the engineering or the software team for the app. So let's see here. How are you? I am doing quite well today. It says, it's quite interesting that despite all the releases, S1II sits comfortably in a unique spot, and even today I'd still pick it over others once again. Awesome! However, after 5 months of shooting, even though I have a long list of firmware updates, fixes, that what I would want, I could choose just one. It would be OpenGate 5.1K 60p subject AF detect when using an external monitor. Yeah, So typically when you get to the higher resolutions, the more power demanding recording modes, the higher frame rate stuff, that's where sometimes there may end up being bandwidth limitations. I don't know 100%. It is something that we can ask engineering team, is it something possible? But like always, stuff like that, it's not something that I could ever, that we could ever promise would be able to be done. I think we have a fairly good track record of, if we're able to do things, we'll do it. But in perspective, the fact that it's still, the S1II is still the only camera that's doing OpenGate 60p, in any kind of camera. It still is a bit of a, not bleeding edge, but it is a very forward edge kind of feature in the cameras. And especially knowing that like HDMI output, it doesn't output the the 3x2 or the 4x3 aspect ratio as the full 5.1K. It has to downsample it. That adds a lot of processing as well. But like I said, it's something we can ask, and we'll definitely bring up and see, you know, what they say. If I ever hear something about it, obviously we're going to talk about it. So next one. So this is actually ties into one of the things that I was kind of preparing to talk about today. So this comes from FC. It says, in real-time LUT settings, why are contrast, highlight, shadow, saturation, hue settings grayed out? Also, in my photo style 1 through 4, those settings are available if standard or natural is used as the photo style. Follow-up was, I want to adjust highlight and shadow in Vlog, higher dynamic range, before converting to Rec 709 to protect them when converting to lower dynamic range in Rec 709. So, there's a lot to unpack there. So, let's take a look at the camera first. So, when we go into the camera, what's being asked about here is we have a number of the different photo styles, right? We've kind of talked about these. If you use our cameras, you know that we have a ton of these. The one being real-time LUT as a named photo style in the camera has a number of different kind of operating parameters. This will be an easy way to put that. One, if you don't have any LUTs loaded on your camera, it's going to default the real-time LUT profile to Vlog. What this means is that it is in the video-oriented logarithmic profile that is designed to maximize the dynamic range at point of capture. This means that you don't have access to contrast control, highlighter, shadow, grain effect, hue, saturation, any of those things, because you're already recording in a logarithmic file. Even if you had control over highlight and shadow in this, it's not going to change anything about what's being captured. If anything, it's actually going to hurt it because you're baking in changes to the log profile. So if your goal is to, in this particular case, I want to use Vlog and I want to convert out to Rec 709, if you do just take a 709 profile and slap it on there, yes, you're going to lose some highlights depending on how you're exposing, because you can either expose for Vlog, which if we're in the profile and say I turn let's go into Vlog here. If I'm in Vlog and I turn my, in this case, false color on, one, you always notice that it drops out of whatever the LUT preview is. So if I have a LUT preview applied on this, so when I press it, it goes to log first, and then it shows me the Vlog or the false color. This is because the exposure should be done based on what Vlog is capable of recording. Your 709 profile, that's almost arbitrary in the sense that a generic one is just generic. It's going to take everything and then just map it out to 709. That's all a LUT's going to do. Where you get to what I think your goal is, FC, is instead of using a standard Rec 709 conversion, is you'd want to have one that's basically tuned and balanced for the exposure that you get on Vlog. So you can take the footage when you bring it into software to then actually do your edit. You're able to apply and change the things that way. If you're trying to shoot and have a baked in LUT so that you can convert to a 709 color space but then still maximize the dynamic range that you have, you would want to generate one yourself. You would want to basically go into something like Resolve or whatever, take a Vlog clip, do the full edit, like how you would want it color graded, how you want your highlights and shadows to fall with that look, how you typically expose if you're someone that overexposes log, or if you stick to the white paper of 42% should be mid-gray. Set up your LUT that way, and then when you load it on, you don't have the same thing where it's just taking a generic 14 plus stops and dropping it down into whatever 709 is available for. Because log is designed to give you that redistribution capability of the bits, where your highlight, your shadow, and your midtones fall. So that's part of the reason why when you look at in camera, you don't have those controls in here, because log is log. You're shooting it because it's designed to be flat. It's already designed to maximize the dynamic range that can be captured at the point. When you go into real-time LUT, depending on the look that you apply to it, is going to change, based on what that look was designed for. If it's a simple 709 conversion like we have in the camera, well, it's designed just for 709. So at that point is where I would then start bringing in lighting, because I know I'm going to shoot in log. I know my output is going to have to be 709. I'm going to light my scene so that either I'm bringing the scene itself back into the right range, and then I know that I have more tonality, more flexibility to shift where my midtones, how my highlights are getting towards clipping, or how dark my shadows run. Doing it the other way around, where I can come in here and say I throw a different LUT on here that's not made for, and this has all the generic ones on here. If I try to take one of those that's also for Vlog, but it's not, like, it's just a generic changeover or normalization, I would still need to do additional work to the look that I want to apply at that point to bring my highlights and shadows into place. That brings up the kind of second point about how the photo profiles or the video profiles work in the camera. And it's, if I come in here and say, one, yes, right now the LUTs are designed based on a log profile by default out of the box if you go into real-time LUT itself. But one thing that you'll notice is that in here, if I go into my LUT selection and I choose one that's designed for a photo-oriented style, you see that changes my base profile to standard, which has things like built-in noise reduction. It has a different tone curve. It's all in a 709 output, I believe, or an sRGB if it's in photo. So you have different parameters where I can come in and I can start playing around with my highlights and shadows because it's designed for that. That's kind of the core difference. It's one of the reasons why, if you're thinking about using Vlog as a photographer, to me, it makes no sense. Especially if you're someone that shoots RAW, because RAW files are already going to have more flexibility than Vlog. There's zero need to shift how the exposure system works or to crush the colors and contrast into a central region to then just have to pull them back out. RAW is RAW. It's kind of the same thing in video. Like, yes, we encode or we utilize Vlog vGamut for your exposure tools in RAW video, but when you bring that RAW footage into a program, if it's ProRes RAW in the camera, or if you're doing Blackmagic RAW into an external recorder, you can change those profiles. You can change what those bits and those colors are designed from by changing what color space it's working in. So yeah, you have a couple of different kind of controls with it. Now, when you get to the My Photo Style options, you notice that your photo styles here can be changed, and certain things like hybrid log gamma, which is designed on the hybrid log gamma specifications, with the only difference being HLG 2100 or HLG F 2100. The F 2100 is you have to turn that on in the menus. The only difference between these two is whether or not it's full range for luminance values or it's limited to the actual, like, what hybrid log gamma is supposed to be set out as for the delivery standard. But under the My Photo Style option, if I go into anything outside of a Like 709, Vlog, Arilog C3, or the HLG modes, if I go to a Cine-like profile or monochrome, whatever, you notice that I have all of those controls available again. It all comes down to what those profiles were originally kind of designed for. Things outside of the standard profile, or things outside out of the video profiles, so Cine-like, the Cine-like profiles to a point, like 709, Vlog, Arilog C3, and hybrid log gamma, they're designed for deliver, not necessarily edit, where Vlog, Rec 709, Rec 709 to a point, because Rec 709's built, it's based on a standard for a delivery color, like a deliver ready profile. That's why you'll see those differences, why you have some controls in some modes, why you don't have controls in other modes, to give you the difference in kind of control with them. So let me go back to Vlog. Let's bring my ISO up. So we're looking at a good image. Did I miss anything else in there? Question. Highlight settings, contrast, LUT settings. You want to adjust, convert. Yeah. So FC, my recommendation would be, if you want to have a LUT, like say you're shooting to burn in a LUT on Vlog, shoot a Vlog clip, go into Resolve, do all of your edits the way you want. So your conversion to 709, you're pushing and pulling your highlights and your shadows to bring them all within the range, and then take all of those things and export that as a look that you can then load in the camera, and it will mimic what you've done on the computer for the edit. So it'll be closer to what you want as delivery. I would say, and I'm going on a little bit of a limb here with this one, because I am 100% not the most authoritative voice on dynamic range and things like that. I leave conversations like that up to like Cine D, to like Matt Fraser, some of the others. But in my experience, Vlog, yes, you have 14 plus stops of just dynamic range that you can work with, depending on what your level of acceptable noise and where your noise floor is, all of that kind of stuff. 709 being a delivery standard that a lot of platforms can read. If you know that you need more dynamic range and you can't find a way to edit a Vlog clip for Rec 709 delivery that's not clipping your highlights or shadows, like you're just having too much difficulty kind of getting the image that way, that's where things like, you know, HLG or Rec 2020 or starting to work in an HDR workflow. That's where your kind of major benefits end up kind of coming into play, because now Vlog vGamut is going to be able to give you enough dynamic range that you can master out for HDR or SDR. And that's a whole nother level of grading and color editing and all that kind of stuff for delivery. So let's see here. OpenGate 60p is the very reason to get the S1II, but being limited to that tiny internal screen or be locked out of subject detection is a reason you can't never be sure if you're truly in focus. I would disagree in that particular sense. The reliance on human face and eye detect, it is great that we have all of these functions, but I can tell you, there are a ton of creators and wedding filmmakers and stuff that are using these cameras without, you know, external screens, and everything's just fine. There are benefits, and it is one of those things, again, that we would definitely be asking the engineering team, is it something that's possible to do? So your follow-up was, so my question is, could we get an option to disable internal screen and get all IF functions while using the external monitor? No. I'm 99% sure that's not how that works for that system. LUMIX Pro Service is exiting Europe. Yes, there is the commentary about that already. LUMIX Pro Service in the United States is remaining. Nothing is changing. That's a constant. That's never been even remotely discussed about changing. Because one of the things to keep in mind is that in the European and EU, or UK and EU, you know, there is already a 5-year warranty in Europe for the products. So you're getting, you know, a higher level of just kind of protection right out of the gate. And the market share has grown massively in a bunch of our regions. So you've already got a really strong platform there with the system. So with everything that's launched and everything that's happening there, and the fact that we've got events that are happening in Europe as well, there's a lot of other ways that the programs can be supported, that users, that people like yourself that are out there actually using the cameras and want us to get, you know, more in-person activities, versus a program that comparatively, because each region runs LUMIX or ran LUMIX Pro services different, slightly different. This is giving the European and the UK teams and users just more access in other areas outside of just a service and support program, which you still have a service and support program. That isn't changing. That is still there. It's just a difference of whether or not you're calling things like this LPS or LUMIX Pro Services, or it's through a service department that is currently used. In the United States, we have LUMIX Pro Service because we have just a different method of doing certain things than other regions. So that's why we have 2 tiers. We have the free tier. You have a paid option if you want to go higher level service and support. We have our service center in Florida where they're all handled. And from every interaction I've had and kind of communicated, our program's pretty well-oiled machine and actually very, very solidly deployed in the U.S. So I look forward to seeing more things that come out of kind of this shift and refocusing. So I think for a lot of you that are in Europe and UK, I think you're gonna see some cooler things come with this change for the system. So Pete says, hey Sean, I have S5II and S9. The manuals for both cameras say the zebras can be set up to 105, and while I can do that on the S5II, the S9 only goes as far as 95%. I don't understand why. I have to double check. Zebras is one of the probably least understood exposure tool modes that I understand in our systems, because zebras can change based on what color profile, what color gamut, what luminance level you're using. There's a lot of things in there, and it's honestly just not something that I've ever really dug too far into. I use waveform, or on the newer cameras I use false color. But Pete, I will link up with Matt now over the next couple of days to try to get a better understanding, so that next week I can give a much better answer. I don't want to spin something for you or kind of like take a guess at what the differences are without being able to get you the exact information for it. So let's see here. Have you ever thought about doing 120 frame per second burst for JPEGs? Well, if it's possible. So on all the cameras, you got to remember that not every camera does things like a super sampled or a full sensor sample for things like 120. And in the video sense, you're cutting height down on the sensor to do C4K or CS4K, which is our 2:4:1 ratio. So that means that, one, in the cameras where you don't have like an open gate 120 frames, it's just not possible to do 120 frames per second without having to either massively reduce resolution or change the field of view to do it. Stills burst rates are still bound by what the sensor is capable of doing in general. So with that known, I can tell you, if we were able to do 120 frames per second stills burst, I'm sure we would have. But hardware dictates whether or not you can do things like that. Let's see here. Is there potential for open gate recording at higher bitrate and subsampling than normal 420 200 megabits per second? Lower resolutions manage to have higher bit rates. C4K tops out at 1.2 gigabit per second somehow. So there is also a massive difference in how much actual information is being recorded from a C4K image, whether or not that's downsampled or it's from a pixel to pixel or Super 35 region versus the full downsampling from width, because again, your height differences are there. OpenGate is recording a lot more overall information. And in general, I think one of the things that kind of gets caught up is we look at and this isn't to minimize subsampling and bit rate, but in a lot of cases we look, comparatively, right, out to what else is in the industry. Others may be using a much less efficient encoding. They may be using stuff like all intra, which, you do want to have a higher bit rate with an all intra codec, because every single individual frame you would want them to have a similar bit rate, to have quality. If you're comparing H.264 to H.264. If you're comparing H.264 to H.265, you have a whole nother set of complications to think about. Is it 422? Is it 420? 200 megabit. The generalized concept would be, if I'm shooting 200 megabit per second in a 420 10-bit HEVC compression, I would need around 400 megabits per second in H.264 to achieve the same quality, because HEVC or H.265 is more efficient, and it's just a better version. It's a newer version. So when you see certain things like C4K being able to top out at 1.2 gigabit, you also want to be clear about this, because there's a lot of people that may not understand. You're also referencing either ProRes or ProRes RAW at that point. You're not comparing it to a heavier compression codec. ProRes All Intra requires a higher bit rate to achieve the same level of image quality. Maybe not as dramatically as this. This is a 200 versus 1.2 gigabit is a lot. It's about a gigabit's worth of difference. But they're also used for in most cases, used for vastly different purposes. ProRes is going to be an all-intra version of a codec. It's much less compressed, so it needs a higher bit rate, which means it's going to be a little bit easier to edit on potentially older hardware. It's also a little bit more standardized across the industry, so more programs generally just accept and work with ProRes. So you have some benefits there. HEVC, it used to be that HEVC was a much harder compression to work with, and a lot of hardware kind of support wasn't really the greatest between graphics cards, CPUs, OSs, programs, things like that. But the fact of the matter is, we're in a very different world than we were, realistically almost 10 years ago when I first really got into this side of the business. I highly recommend looking at people who have actually shot and pushed all of these different, kind of compressions and codecs and bit rates together to really see what the differences are. Numbers tell one story, and this is true for everything. Numbers will tell you one story, and for a lot of us, we'll see 1.2 is bigger than 200, so why wouldn't I want 1.2 gigabit? Especially with compressed codecs, it works the opposite way. If you got a really heavily compressed codec and it's a higher bit rate, it's going to be way harder for your computer to work with. But you also hit points of diminishing return where higher bit rate just for the sake of higher bit rate doesn't actually change anything, meaningful in the image. We did this, we as in the industry did this years ago in, kind of the difference between all intra and IPB or long GOP for the general everyday user. If you were to take two scenes side by side and you were an everyday user, two scenes side by side, graded the same way, one was all intra, one was from an HEVC or, a long GOP compression, I would be willing to bet the vast majority of people would not be able to tell a difference. So it kind of points out, hey, if you have very specific needs in what you're filming and what you need for a project, yes, of course, there are projects where they're going to say, hey, this needs to be shot in ProRes. Cool, shoot in ProRes. That's great. You do also run into other kind of challenges. Smaller cameras, interchangeable lens mirrorless cameras, they are hybrid cameras. They are not cinema-oriented cameras or cinema-designed cameras. So ultra higher bitrate, all intra options, stuff like that are all going to generate heat, going to generate much larger file sizes, and be substantially larger file sizes compared to a 4K output versus, say, 6K. They all have impacts in these kinds of setups. If you ever find yourself at the point where it's like, look, I desperately need, one, open gate. I need it in the highest bit rate possible, preferably things like ProRes, or I need it to be, the top of the line performance. You're still looking typically at dedicated cinema cameras at that point, where they're spec jobs. You're probably going to be using a camera like that, not necessarily as an A-cam with a hybrid camera. Or you could take the different approach and shoot stuff like that on this camera, which many people have done, even on GH cameras, and the vast majority of people would never tell. When we launched the GH7, we put it up against an Alexa Mini in our booth, color grading both of them with a professional colorist, and it was near impossible to see the difference between the two. And that's from an actual, working colorist in Hollywood. So if someone like that is, looking at footage day in and day out, that's actually grading footage from high-end cinema cameras, can take a $2,000 Micro Four Thirds camera, mind you, and say confidently, I put these side by side, and from a color grade, can't tell a difference. I think that's kind of telling for the vast majority, that sometimes we get too wrapped up in some of the details here. Bitrate being one of them. Giovanni, is OpenGate 60 FPS 8-bit like the GH5? Can record an option for the current line of cameras an option, or is it still a technical bridge too far or just not wanted? The industry in general has moved so far away from 8-bit as the capture format, especially since, even our smartphones will record in 10-bit for the most part, especially if you're doing like the HDR recording that most of our phones can do now. So yeah, things like 8-bit options, we have a couple of them in the camera, but the industry and the market's moved on. The support system for editing has moved on. So you're not likely to see 8-bit profiles really be that prolific in the industry anymore. Art Vision says LUMIX Lab app is great gateway app. Have you thought about offering other log curves in the app to get more market share from other brands as well, at least other L-mount devices? So other log curves. So log curves, as you mean like from other products out there? If that's what you mean, that's actually a big problem, because companies own their log curves. They're kind of protected properties across the board. So we have Vlog vGamut. That's why we license Arilog C3. Arilog C3 being a video designed profile is one of the reasons why it's not something usable in LUMIX Lab, because it's a video oriented higher end cinema level kind of color grading pipeline, and it actually works a little different than Vlog as far as what its intended workflow is. So there are a lot of things in the way of being able to do stuff like that. That doesn't mean that people themselves, like if you need to match our log curve or our camera to a different camera, that doesn't mean that you couldn't potentially generate a LUT loaded in the camera that, on the fly can basically create a CST to match the camera to another system. You can do that with any camera. Though with other cameras you have to do that on the computer side. You could do that in our camera. But you would have to generate it. You would have to create the CST to convert it to whatever log profile you want, put it on the camera, and then your exposure tools would still be based at that point on Vlog, so you'd have to accommodate for that. But if you're designing a LUT and you're putting it in the camera, you could compensate for that with the LUT that you design. Yeah. Love is a Battlefield. 69. Nice. Are V30 SD cards likely to work for my S1R2? My S5II never had an issue with them. I am going to say it depends on what you do with the camera. V30 cards, if you're using the camera for photography, the S5II is probably fine. With an S1R2, I personally, I wouldn't run V30 cards in my cameras, not anymore. Not necessarily because I think of a risk of having like problems, but with higher file, like larger file sizes on the S1R2, because now you're nearly double the resolution. You're writing, you know, about twice the amount of information, roughly. It's not an exact doubling of file size. V30 cards, if you do use them in a camera where you're kind of really pushing it, you will easily see the differences in the video side, where the camera is very likely to give you a recording stop due to write speed. That's a very common error. It's one of the reasons why we don't recommend using anything below V60. From the photography side, if you're just casually taking photos, you're probably not going to see a problem, honestly. But the second you start shooting a little bit faster, you'll notice that the camera's going to take a lot longer to buffer out the images. Because now your bottleneck isn't whatever the buffer's read-write is. Your bottleneck then becomes how fast the card can take the files into it. On the flip side of it, when you're working with higher resolution cameras from the photography side, now your offloading time is going to take a heck of a lot longer because you're stuck at V30, which is only 30 megabytes per second, where V60 and V90 you're going to get way faster offloads as long as your USB support is there for it. So V30 cards, I would classify these days in pretty much any camera. V30 cards are good backup cards, just in case. It's like oh no, I'm at a job and I forgot my card if I'm in photography. And you've got a V30 card, if we're professionals or you're traveling or you're just having fun with it, you're going to make do with what you have. But with the cost of V60 cards now, I don't really see a reason why V30 cards still exist. Speaking of grain effect, any chance we can get an extra level added? The current low setting is a bit too strong in some profiles when you just want look of very light texture. Can you check? I can check into it. I can almost guarantee we're not going to change low, standard, and high for that. There's just not anywhere near enough people kind of saying that they don't like the grain. In fact, it's realistically more the opposite. We get a lot more kind of commentary that low is actually kind of like a sweet spot. But I will pass that on. Our team will definitely, kind of take a look at it. I just can't really make too much. I can't even make any promises on that one. So, where did that next one go? Well, Arri Film Lab works seamlessly with Log C3 from the S1II Series. I actually had a conversation with Matt Fraser about this, I think yesterday, because we saw the news about Arri Film Lab. Let me talk with him and kind of get a better understanding of it. I've only just actually, like 10 minutes before this stream, I just perused one of the articles about it. Let me check on it and get you actual, like, a little bit more detailed info, so we can talk about that next week. Can we have different zebras, 1-2 per control dial setting, or only on the custom dial settings? And did you, Panasonic LUMIX, trademark the term open gate? Seems like you were the first. Open gate is a term that I believe has been used for years, like decades. I don't think that term can be, but I am not a trademark attorney, lawyer. I do not give legal advice. I don't know any of that stuff. No idea. But we have been probably the most prolific with it in modern era about OpenGate and its capabilities. So it's nice to see that others are falling in line and only hoping to achieve what we're able to do. Does the S1 Mark II series have the same 3.3 MP4 Lite codec that the S9 has? I heard it only does it as proxy files. No, the S1 Mark II series does not have MP4 Lite in the cameras. The S9 does, the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, I think GH7? So those cameras have it. The S1 Mark II series does not have MP4 Lite. And there isn't a proxy option for OpenGate in the S1 Mark II. Let's see here. Can you suggest to LUMIX HQ that they create a website or mini manual that goes into a lot of depth on how to load and use real-time LUTs on LUMIX cameras, with lots of tips included? That is actually something I have asked them for. Because I know, it's easy for me to kind of just run through a camera and be like, hey, click this, do this, go here, select that, load it in here. It is very different if you would just have the ability to just, have either a website that you can reference. Obviously in modern era, it wouldn't be a printed book for many of us, but let me see what I can do about that, and we'll get back to you on that one. I remember the GH4 used to store 4 faces for subject ID. I wonder if this can be reworked to bolster new AF stickiness with multiple interfering subjects. No idea on that one. I know there are a lot of questions when it comes to storing, identifying information in cameras that I believe is a much more complicated conversation than just, yeah, you can store faces in a camera. But I can ask the engineering team. I know, yes, years ago we had the ability where you could register faces in the cameras, but I know that it was removed for specific reasons in the cameras. Within the S series, how can you tell which quality codec in the camera is H.264 versus H.265? I'm unsure if it shows this in S5 cameras. One of the easiest ways to tell is if the camera records 420 10-bit in an IPB compression, so long GOP, so it's 420 10-bit long GOP, it's going to be an HEVC compression. If it's 422 all intra, it's an H.264. Sean, just reposting a feature request for LUMIX Lab. Please consider adding picture profile filter to the region. And 2, adding a search by LUT name would be helpful. Yeah, there's always going to be things that we're working on improving, especially as far as usability goes in Lab. The number of people that use LUMIX Lab, I've seen the kind of like how many active sessions are on it is huge. So we know there's a lot of people that are using it. We know that there's a lot of people that have, recommendations like this. And we do work to kind of test features, add them in when we can, work on them so that we can get, kind of as smooth as an operation as we can get with these different things. Ruckus says, base ISO for vlog video is 640. However, do you recall what the base ISO is for photo? And does the base ISO change based on photo style and JPEG RAW? Looking to maintain the most dynamic range. So, as far as ISOs go, if you ever want to know what the native ISOs or the base ISOs of a particular photo style is, if you go into the camera, you'll look and say, it says vlog here. If I turn the camera to change my dual native ISO sensitivity to low, this will force it into the low range. If I go into my ISO value, you'll see 640, so that's the lowest. Without going into extended, that means that that's the native ISO. If I go into the settings here and I go to high, and then I go in again, you'll see that the lowest I can go is 4000. Those are your native ISOs, 640, 4000. Now, if I go into a different color profile, so let's go into a kind of standard profile. Well, not a quote-unquote standard. Let's go into standard profile. If I do the same thing here, I go low. My lowest ISO is 100. That's the native ISO in the low circuit range. If I go into high, 640. So on your high and low circuit, that'll tell you whatever the lowest number is, that tells you what your native ISO is. Jumping between different profiles, that's gonna roughly give you the best. It's not 100% the same if I'm in, you know, like if I'm shooting in log, like in this case ARRI log, you'll see the numbers are a little different. High is 3200 versus 4000 on vlog. These different ISOs, especially from the video sense, they are designed to balance noise and dynamic range. It's not always the case that the lowest ISO value is going to get you the most dynamic range. If you have cameras that have the ability to do extended ISO, anything lower than what the standard ISO is usually causing some sort of clipping of highlights or something along those lines. So if you're shooting video and you want to maximize dynamic range, then it's, you know, stick to 640, 4000. The reality is, in modern filmmaking, I think there are benefits to sticking to the native ISOs and lighting a scene properly, so you get the most usable stops of dynamic range. But in the still side of the industry, it's not as big of a difference these days. I mean, you may be talking a couple stops different, and it's going to really more depend on, you know, the higher up you go. No matter what, the higher the ISO you go, you are going to be losing dynamic range from the absolute lowest native, you know, kind of base ISO. But I think in a lot of cases, you'll realize that, like, shooting at 100 ISO, even if on paper, if a certain website says, well, you get the most dynamic range by shooting at 100 ISO, okay, cool. That's also not practical in a vast majority of scenarios. You have to balance out dynamic range's worth versus the shutter speeds that you would need to capture a certain image, or what the noise level is valuable enough for. Yeah. Alright, so I guess I would say maybe an access style feature in the LUMIX Lab app, if that would be a workaround, but I'm not sure. It would be a solid idea, but I can see if it gets a tad confusing. You know, a lot of brands pretend they have great image quality. You guys have kept the standard high with all intercodecs and high bit rates. Others have padded the stats. Trying to see what I missed. Okay, I don't see what I missed on the rest there. Anyway. Any possible insight on bug fix for LUMIX Flow app on iOS with S5 Mark II unable to connect to an external monitor? Camera shows Flow icon when connected to USB-C, but Flow says connect with LUMIX. From everything I have tested with iPad, with iPhones, we've had others test it. It's not a bug with the app. It's likely a configuration problem somewhere between the camera and the phone. I would recommend Ruckus at this point. Try fully uninstalling, and if you've already done this, I apologize. I can't remember the last conversation we had with it. Try uninstalling the app, reinstall it, make sure that all the permissions are made available to the app that it requests. Make sure the cable that you're using is not a USB 2 cable. A common problem that I run into is people will use the cable that came with their phone to try to connect to Flow, and that is not a data cable. I have cables like this from Anchor that I have picked up on Amazon. These cables, they are fast charging cables, but they are not data cables. If I use one of these, flow likes to bug out. If I use a cable like this one, that is actually rated at, 40 gigabit per second, so this is a fast rated, thicker cable, flow works perfectly fine. So I would check the cables, honestly, first. If that doesn't work, try disconnecting, reconnecting. Double check your phone settings to make sure that, how you're connecting on USB. If the app is trying to not allow a connection over USB. Android devices can run into this where if you deny access, you have to reset permissions. So all of those little things could be causing an impact, but yeah. Art says, I heard that autofocus algorithms hold more weight than the AF points after 300 AF points. What's your thoughts on that? Would you agree? I don't know where that would have come from. I would have no idea. Autofocus points versus subject detection or the algorithms. What I would say is all systems work with the more stuff you can give them would be good, but yeah. Tried using LUMIX Lab to add a LUT, but it would not because my photo was raw. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. Kraken Lens. Nice name. LUMIX Lab, as of right now, I don't know if this is going to change. LUMIX Lab is only designed to edit JPEGs and HEIF files. So that means you can only apply changes and edits to the JPEGs when you're in LUMIX Lab. If you want to edit the raw files, you would need to use a program like Lightroom Mobile or Snapseed or any other compatible raw editing program. And some of those will let you apply a lookup table or .cube file to that particular image. So you didn't do anything wrong. The app just doesn't support raw still imaging. If you tried a JPEG or an HEIF file, if it's on the newer cameras, it would work perfectly fine. Hi, Sean. On using LUTs for shooting JPEG straight out of camera, I think it would be great if an option could be added to show the eye dynamic range settings in the My Photo style, just like you can white balance. That would be interesting. In general, Ross, it's usually not recommended to use eye dynamic range. It's there, it's available, but in most cases that I've ever come across, users that are working at a little bit higher of a level, as far as like what kind of image quality you're looking for, find that not using eye dynamic range tends to just be better. Because you can do the same thing with the tone curves. But I can ask them if it's something that could potentially be added. I don't know if it would make sense to put it in there. But yeah, I'll ask them, Ross. For S series, is there a way in the custom white balance to see what temperature the camera came up with, specifically in video, when using a white balance card? No, at this time, no. You can see the white balance figure in the video metadata. So if you use a program like Media Info, which is what I use on my Mac and my PC, you can white balance, I believe, is embedded in there. And then obviously if you shoot raw video, you have that information. But yeah, the camera doesn't display it. I have asked about it. Is the Flow app able to de-squeeze anamorphic video? If possible, I can't make it work. No, that's not something that we've ever said that the Flow app has the capability to do. Is it possible for the S1II to get the webcam functionality from the new cameras? Whenever I use USB tethering and set 4K streams, it only shows us 1440p on YouTube. So, no. The S1II and S1II series don't have the kind of hardware in general needed to do USB UVC, from what I've been told. That's why it needed the newer cameras for us to be able to do it. Whenever I use USB tethering and set 4K stream, it only shows up as 1440p on YouTube. That might be more of a YouTube thing. I know YouTube and live streaming, like, limitations or settings can really alter kind of what you're capable to do. So as an example, for these streams, I stream at normal latency, which allows me to do 4K streams. If I change this to low latency, it caps me at 1440p. And I believe if I go to ultra low latency, I think it also caps me at either 1440p or 1080. So there are some on YouTube's side as far as what its limitations are. So maybe double check your stream latency, or whatever the defaults are set on the back end side for YouTube. But I have broadcast in 4K before, and it's worked fine. When do you find it best to use luminance spot meter? So I just realized I've been talking with the camera screen up the entire time. Wow, I'm professional. Anyway, luminance spot meter. Probably one of my more common times that I will use luminance spot meter is actually... Well, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm just going to program luminance spot meter. Luminance spot meter, for those that don't know, it's the tool that allows me to put a box over different parts of the image, and I can tell where the exposure's lying on either the stop scale or on the percentage scale. If you're in a logarithmic profile, it'll tell you in stops, so 0 being either 42 IRE or I think it's 39 IRE for Arilog C3. So I can come through here and say, okay, the top of my S1R right here is at about 0, so it's plus or minus 0.1 stop. In practical use cases, I will use it if I am filming outdoors. If I'm doing a talking head scene and I've got a bunch of clouds overhead, or I've got a really bright white background, or say... Well, yeah, no, it's really like if I'm doing like studio work where I've got like a background, like a white background, or even if I've got like a gray seamless, I can use the luminance spot meter to put it on that background and make sure that either my white background is actually white at that point. So you can use it as a way to say, I need to overexpose this image enough so that that background goes completely white. Especially if there's not supposed to be any detail in it. It gives you leeway to be able to push your exposure way up and out. But if I'm doing like a landscape or something like that, I'll use it to kind of spot check clouds. You know, are those clouds completely blown out, or are they like hovering at the edge? Depending on what ISO or what color profile I'm in, which camera I'm on, it will tell me like kind of where my levels and stuff like that are. Would you say it's best to balance skin tones as well? You can, but it depends on how you're exposing. If you're someone that exposes to protect your highlights, so you overexpose to the brightest that you can to lift your shadows up, but you're protecting your highlights there, it's not really going to help you in that particular case for skin tone, because that's not what you would be shooting for. If you are shooting specifically to say, I want my skin tones right where they're supposed to be, at, you know, like kind of like right in the middle, you could do it. I find that the box is a little big to be able to kind of get a relatively accurate view on skin tone. That's where I would use, if I have false color available, I'll use that, or I will use waveforms over luminance spot meter. I have used zebras for that before, because I can go into my zebra settings. I can go into my zebra settings and say, hey, for zebra 1, I want this to actually be a base and range. So I want this to be 0, and I want it to be plus or minus 2. So now what this means is that in this particular case, the zebras are only going to show up if I have them set at 1. Zebra 1 is only going to show up where the exposure is plus or minus 2. Or in this case, what did I say it was? It's plus or minus 0.2 of a stop. So roughly a quarter of a stop. Above and below middle gray, or whatever the gray point is set. So I will use zebras like this every once in a while, because then I know, like, if I see the zebras on the face, that'd be cool. We'd be there. But in most cases, I'm using false color, because with false color, I know make sure that the green and the pink is on the skin tones, and I know that I'm kind of like right there where skin should be. I love my B4 HD broadcast lens. I adapt on Micro Four Thirds. Are there adapters for L-mount 2? To my knowledge, no. I do not believe there are any adapters for that. I could be wrong, but I don't really dig too far into B4 lenses. Okay, I want to do one other... or I want to talk about one other thing here. So, right now, we've got... Let me clear my notifications here. Well, there we go. So I want to do one other kind of thing here to remind everybody a little bit, because we talked about, you know, LUTs and things like that. If you've never designed a LUT, say you're coming from the video side, right? I create video content. I'm used to working in DaVinci Resolve. I'm used to generating LUTs from a video perspective, but I want to create one for a stills perspective. You want to keep in mind that the base profile that you're going to use are different. The vlog based LUTs, they're great, but if you're going to use them in the stills format, remember that you're basically not completely throwing away the raw file, but you're going to be capturing a raw that's not really meant to be shot that way, and it's going to not be a great editing time for the raw still. So if you want to do something like that for the still side of it, I recommend using something like, in this case, I'm going to use Photoshop to demonstrate this. Using Photoshop to generate the LUT for your particular image. So I have this picture here. This is my pup, and it's just a standard raw image from the S1 Mark II. So I have the image, S1 Mark II or S1R Mark II. So this is the high res. So you would do any of the edits that you're going to want to apply to the image from here. So that means I would go to, where is my setup? So we're going to come in here and let's do, what do we want to add? Let's do adjustment layer. Let's add a little bit of curves. So we're going to come in here and let's say I want to bring this up. And I'm just going to throw some like a bunch of just different little things on here, just so everyone's aware. So we're going to do that. Let's go, let's add a photo filter. Let's add a cooling filter a little bit here. That's a little too aggressive. Let's drop this. Bring it down a little bit. And then let's just add one other layer here. Let's do something crazy or very different. Let's add a channel mixer. So let's change this to, so this is red channel. We're going to go, let's do a red and blue channel swap. And then let's go to blue. Let's change this to 0. Let's change this to 100. So there. Not that I would ever actually use this particular look, but we've got a difference that clearly we've seen here. What you would do from this point... Oh, it's because I'm trying to move the background here. Hang on. Will this let me change it? There we go. Go back in here. So what editing like this allows me to do is I have those changes that I've made here in my layers. I can then come in and go into File, want to export, and I want to export a color lookup table. This is where I come in and I say I want a 33-point look. I want a .cube file. I can create the description, the copyright, all that kind of stuff if you want to add it. And then I can save this out and create this look. This will then now take my look and allow me to send it over to my camera or to my other program, whatever it is that I want to work with, and have that look available. It is a little different than working because now it's not going to be based, it's not something generated off of Vlog. So now when I load this and I use this as like a standard in my camera, if I use the real-time LUT function, that means that my raw files are going to be standard, you know, sRGB or Adobe RGB if you have the camera set up that way. Raw files that when I bring those into programs like Lightroom or Photoshop, they're not going to have the issue where like they're underexposed or, you know, they're really, really flat. If I can, you know, if I tell the program to, you know, kind of recognize that this was shot in Vlog, it makes the still side of shooting a lot easier. Yes, it's a little bit more challenging compared to if I'm using just Vlog, because you can just use, you know, DaVinci Resolve, and I know a lot of videographers are used to just doing it that way. But if you're going to be doing stills and you want to create a serious look, that's one way I recommend doing it. There are supposedly some ways that you can take Lightroom presets and convert them over. I have yet to get any of those to work, and some of them charge you for their services, and I still haven't been able to see them, you know, really kind of work. But some people have had luck with those. But that's how I'd recommend actually generating a LUT for the camera if you're going to do anything from the still side. Oh, it's after 2 o'clock already. Let me double check here. Any idea how popular those creative filters, i.e. retro old days, are? They seem to be very dated. Any chance they'd be swapped out or expanded with newer model options? The vast majority of them we've actually removed from the cameras, so we're kind of down to a pretty basic level of creative filters, and I'll tell you, when we first made that change, people got really mad, but nobody used them. So I don't think there's really much ever going to be changed there. To be honest, I think the real-time LUT system is really just kind of taken that whole initial idea of like creative filters away, because now you don't have to be stuck with whatever is decided is in the camera. You can use the app and find a bunch of different ones that you like, or you can create one yourself and load it in. Yeah. The new 20-60 is an awesome f2.8 lens. Any hope to see a 2.8 version of the 16-35 or a 24-105? What if we ask really nicely? Look, if I knew of anything that we've got coming out, I wouldn't tell you. You've all heard this before. I wouldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, even if I did know. But I will agree that 20-60 is an awesome 2.8 lens. I love that lens. And I'm normally not a zoom lens kind of person. Since you mentioned streaming, do you think we can save stream info in the future? I'll have to double check. I think the stream info is saved from shot to shot. So like if you use the same stream key, which you probably shouldn't do, I think it does save in the camera if it's loaded. Art says, oh, you do have lots of monochrome options. What are the key differences in your opinion? Oh, for the different monochrome in the camera? The key differences, as far as like the actual black and white profiles go, so Leica monochrome, L monochrome S, D, regular L monochrome, monochrome. The key differences really comes down to just the level of contrast between kind of each one and like where the black points lie for each one. Leica monochrome is actually designed by Leica for the cameras. So this is Leica monochrome is designed to be Leica's monochrome. L monochrome S is kind of like a softer, kind of silkier look, so it's a little bit less contrast. D is a little bit harsher contrast. Regular L monochrome was just kind of the base monochrome that we made years ago. And then just general monochrome, you'll see there's a little bit of difference as far as like how bright the highlights get versus L monochrome. They're all just slightly different for different use cases. And the cool thing is those profiles can be, kind of changed around a little bit. I want cute dessert filters in my S1R2. Don't we all want cute filters? Kind of thought that might be the case. I do miss tilt shift effect. One that I hadn't seen along, which is one that I used, the only one I used. Yeah, the tilt shift filter effect that used to be on a lot of the cameras, I don't think it worked as well in like the full frame cameras. At least I had never really seen great examples of it being used. But yeah, and honestly, editing software and app editing has gotten like way better. To where I think the results I can get out of a phone are better than what a filter effect like that would do in the camera. Which is your favorite? From the monochromes, honestly, it is the Leica monochrome. The only thing I do to Leica monochrome, if I'm going to be using Leica monochrome, is I will typically come in and I will put either a red or a green filter on it in the camera. And then I use just, if I'm not in video, I use just one low setting for grain effect. So if I am in the photo mode, I will do, this will be what my setup is. So I'll be like a monochrome because I like how punchy it is. I will go into a red filter and then I will add low noise. And that is pretty much my go-to if I'm going to shoot black and white with the camera. Okay. Sean, is Lightroom still having issues with the S1R2 files? I have not done actually a big dive into Lightroom as far as the S1R2 files. I have edited S1R2 files recently in Lightroom, at least on mobile, and it seems like it's a little bit better, but I haven't done a direct comparison. I can take a look and see, because I have both Capture One and Lightroom. So I'll do a couple little comparisons and see, and maybe we can talk about that next week. All right. Other than that, we are at time for this week. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You all had some awesome questions. I think it was all pretty well centered around LUTs and color profiles and stuff like that. So I will take that as a win for today. With that, we will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. On YouTube. So this would be great. Oh wait, I would love to see you pioneer in power zooms, anamorphic, and cineglass. Well, I mean, we are the vessel that those lenses and most of those lenses can attach to. I know power zooms is a bit of a sore subject. Somewhere Matt Fraser's ears are ringing or burning because we said power zoom. Anyway, yeah, we will be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. So that is going to be the 20th. As a just kind of reminder for those in the United States, we will not have a stream on the 27th. That is Thanksgiving here in the United States, and I will be taking a few days off just to spend time with some family. But then we will be back on the 4th of December, and holy crap, it's already, almost December. Yeah. If I didn't get to your question, or you want to leave more detailed info about a request or the question that you have, or if you just didn't want to ask a question in the live stream, drop it in the comment section at after this video is posted, right down underneath it. That helps me make sure I've got the information and stuff so that we can, follow up on it in the following weeks. It helps me kind of understand, it helps our engineering team understand the things that you as the, actual users of the cameras are kind of asking and wanting to see, especially in future development. And it also just helps the video. It helps with engagement. It helps more people see it. If you like the video, give a like. If you don't subscribe, maybe think about subscribing. It helps as well. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I hope you get out, create some cool stuff this weekend. If you do, share it with us. Join us over on Discord. Links down in the description. Yeah, have a great day and weekend, y'all. See you next week. Bye.